Linux has been getting popular and popular since the last few years, especially after the end of life announcement of Windows 10. So I daily drove Linux for a whole week, and I will show my experiences, my problems, the things I like about it, and some performance stats as well. So let's get into this. So the first thing that I had to do was find a Linux distro. To find a Linux distro, I did the most expected thing you could do on a search engine. I searched up what is the best Linux distro, and obviously I didn't get a straight answer. So I went for looking for many things. Linux distros. I looked into Fedora, Ubuntu Studio, to Linux Mint, Java Arch Linux. It's Arch, by the way. The things I was looking for was editing on it, being able to game on it, needs to be stable. It doesn't break often, it's customizable, and it supports NVIDIA GPU since I have one. So after maybe like an hour of research, I chose Linux Mint. It's the most stable. I've heard that it can do a lot for the NVIDIA GPU. And editing field possible on it too, with some tweaks obviously. So I downloaded the ISO from the Linux Mint's website, which is pretty obvious. And to make it a USB bootable drive, I needed something like Rufus or another third-party software to make it a USB drive. But I found something else. In my previous video when I made the cloud, I used something called Ventoy. So I went ahead, formatted that USB and installed Ventoy again. And for those who don't know what Ventoy is, it's just an open source software that goes into a USB. It makes it possible that you can boot into multiple ISOs from a single USB. I used this USB, installed Ventoy on it, and transferred the Linux Mint ISO on it. I also keep a Windows 10 ISO on this USB now, just in case if something goes wrong. So after getting the USB ready, I shut down my PC and plugged it in and restarted my PC. So this is the first try, and I say first try for a specific reason. I entered the live environment, pretty nice. I opened the installer, I started making progress somewhere, but instead of clicking install along the OS, I clicked on something else because I thought I was a professional at this, to make a custom partition table. And that's where I went completely wrong. I'm not a professional at this. So somehow, and I say somehow because I still don't understand what I did wrong and what I was doing correct in the partition table. So that happened, and I was pretty mad at this because I didn't know that this was going to be this complicated, and I don't think it's complicated, I'm just lazy. And after getting this error at the map menu, which I'm going to blur for some reason, I had to restart my PC to get it unstuck and make the partition bootable again. And on the second try, that's the second try of installing Linux Mint on my PC, I used ChatGPT to help me make the partition table, which worked great, and I was done for that day, well, for that specific turn. And the first try never goes smoothly, does it, huh? And I also made a partition for my SSD for the Linux space. And since it was getting pretty late, I tried to update the system and tried to install some apps, but I couldn't. So the next morning I did that. I installed my simple apps like Zen, Obsidian, OBS, and updated my system and installed my drivers in a few clicks. That is something I was not expecting, and I was able to cleanly install NVIDIA GPU drivers pretty easily in a few clicks, which makes sense. It's Linux, and I never thought it'd be so easy after hearing all the rant from people struggling to install NVIDIA drivers on Linux. But the most unexpected thing that happened to me was that Grub didn't recognize my Windows 10 on my PC, so it didn't give me the option to either boot into Windows 10 or boot into Linux, which was pretty bad because all of my stuff, all of my project files, all of the app settings, and so many other things were on Windows. So that's the first thing that I want to fix. So let's make a list of legendary things that I want to do on Linux. So the first thing that I want to do is fix that Windows 10 boot issue somehow, and then install DaVinci Resolve on it, and if I could edit on it, edit this whole video on DaVinci. So let's fix the Grub boot issue. So the reason Grub was not giving me the option to boot into Windows was probably because Grub didn't recognize my Windows installation for some reason, and that was probably because I clicked something else instead of install along the OS. So my bad. But that was not the case, it seemed. Grub did recognize my Windows installation. According to ChatGPT, I had to go into this specific config file and make the menu visible on boot. I did that and restarted the PC. It did not work for the first time. I did it again, according to ChatGPT. In the same config file, I did some more things. That didn't work. But on the third try, I got another config file. I did some modification to that file and that worked. I was able to boot into Windows. But installing DaVinci was a nightmare, to be honest. So let me go through the process of installing DaVinci Resolve on Linux. First, you go to the DaVinci Resolve's website and install the Linux dev version. So you install the Linux version, but you can't just install it even if you make it executable, because it doesn't come with the dependencies it needs and the codecs it needs to be able to run. So I had to install a third-party software called Make Resolve Deb just to get the dependencies and codecs that are needed to run the software. So I did that. I cloned the GitHub repo and started installing the sh file and used ChatGPT to be able to do the rest of the things. And after maybe like 3 tries, I got it to work, and it finally detected my DaVinci Resolve deb file and started patching it somehow. And I thought this was getting nice. So I waited and waited. It crashed. I tried it again. I waited for a bit, but then I got the error of permissions and stuff like that, and I didn't have enough space on my main SSD, blah 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 blah. So many things, but it was a hassle over 2 hours, I think. But it was finally done. I had installed DaVinci Resolve. Errors reported 0, and I was able to completely run the patched installer. Started installing the software. I got to this installing file menu. It's very nice, and I was finally able to boot into it. So I had DaVinci Resolve 20 on my PC, and I was pretty happy about it until the Linux version of DaVinci Resolve does not support .mp4 video files, nor do they support MKV or MOV. And I tried many codecs. I tried different camera footages, different even there. It just did not work. So which was pretty bad. And then I went on to Minecraft comparison. Let's get into the Minecraft testing. I had 2 categories. One where I recorded my FPS without recording, and then I recorded my FPS on while recording with OBS, and the seed is you can see on the screen. So while not recording the gameplay, I was getting about 9 FPS on 1% loss and 9 FPS on 0.1% loss, and average FPS on Windows was 120. On the other hand, on Linux, the average FPS was way better. I was getting 250 FPS on average. My 1% lows were at 86. That's a substantial, big, huge improvement of Windows over Windows on stutters. On Linux, it was just fine. I had a few stutters in here and there while loading chunks, but on Windows, it was just always stuttering for me. So it was kind of nice to see a gameplay without stuttering on my own local machine. My 0.1% lows were at 40 FPS on Linux. So now on recording, on Windows, I was getting 110 FPS, so not that big of a drop from not recording. My 1% lows were better somehow. It was 20 FPS and 0.1% lows were at 4 FPS, so it's pretty bad. The stutters were big. But on Linux, it was the same story. I got way better FPS. The average FPS has gone down quite a bit, but it was still better than Windows. It got 125 FPS on average, 45 FPS on 1% lows, and 20 FPS on 0.1% lows. So yeah, would I switch to Linux with my current needs and situation? Absolutely freaking not. There's no way I will be able to switch to Linux anytime soon. Thanks for watching. Consider subscribing to my channel if you like tech content, and give me feedback in the comments. I really need that.